The second way in which political language is in crisis is the way in which some political terms and phrases and descriptions have become so emptied of substance that they now mean the opposite of what they once meant. And there are a few examples of this that I want to give. The first is the word progressive. Whenever I hear someone describe themselves as progressive now, I know that they are not progressive. It's the easiest way to work out if someone's progressive. You can see this all the time. Almost everyone who describes themselves as progressive is actually opposed to progress, is actually largely very uncomfortable with the ideas of the Enlightenment and with the ideas of a future-orientated humanist desire to expand man's influence over nature, to develop the forces of production, to move forward and progress. Even environmentalists call themselves progressive, and you just know they're taking the mick. I've heard people say, we are progressives opposed to fracking. And you just want to shake them by their collars and say, that means you're not progressive. You are opposing a progressive step, a new form of industry, something that could give people employment and create more energy. That's not progressive. The other word that has utterly changed meaning is anti-racist. To be anti-racist now is to be hyper-conscious about race. To be anti-racist now is to think racially all the time. It is to say to people, you're white, you're black, you're this, you're that. It is to behave in the way racist people used to behave, although it's done in a very politically correct way. To be anti-racist now is to go and see a movie in the cinema and count the number of black faces, and then write a Tumblr post later about how terrible it is that Hollywood won't employ enough black people. It is to be myopically racial, obsessively racial. That to me is the opposite of what anti-racist used to mean, which was to get rid of the whole nonsense idea of race. Free speech now means the opposite of what it used to mean. Free speech used to mean you wanted free speech. Now, very often, people will argue for censorship under the guise of freedom of speech. One example of that is Yvette Cooper, who is pushing this thing called Reclaim the Internet, which wants new rules and regulations on the internet so people can't say certain things. And she says this is not about limiting free speech, this is about expanding it. Because if we allow trolls to speak online, other people feel that they can't speak. So in calling for the regulation of speech, she says she is defending freedom of speech. Utterly Orwellian. Censorship is freedom. The other two words that now are emptied of meaning is conservative and Labour. The Conservative Party is no longer interested in conserving things, and the Labour Party no longer knows anyone who labours for a living. The Conservative Party, if you just look at their Gender Identity Act, which would allow anyone to claim to be any gender regardless of reality, looks to me like a complete and utter embrace of postmodernism, a destruction of tradition at its very core. That is the end of any suggestion that the Conservative Party is the Conservative Party. Labour increasingly looks to me like a movement against ordinary people rather than for ordinary people. A movement that wants to police and control what people see and eat and how often they can gamble, and which sees them as a problem to be solved rather than a people to be represented. The left increasingly means being against ordinary people rather than for them, and the Brexit debate proves that too.